Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Drew Neisser. Drew is the founder of Renegade, the award-winning strategic boutique for B2B innovators and CMO huddles. And he is the author of a couple of books, the most recent being Renegade Marketing. He is, ranked among top CMO influencers. He's been on ABC News, CNBC, all those usual suspects. But instead of talking about him, I prefer to talk with him. So welcome aboard, Drew. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Peter, thank you. And thank you for having me, but thank you for doing your podcast, because as a podcaster, I know how much work these are. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So let's sort of dive in here. So your domain expertise, your thought leadership is about CMOs, obviously marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Selfishly, I'll ask, where do you see CMOs embracing thought leadership, being confused by, and maybe not even knowing sort of how to process it?
Well, I'm going to try to break it down. I mean,
Sure.
You're right. That is my expertise. I've interviewed probably over 500 CMOs now, plus with CMO huddles, I'm talking to 50 plus every single month. But thought leadership fits in this giant domain of their personal brand, the company brand, the executive brand, and this horrible beast called a content calendar. And between all of that, I would say under an even greater category, in 2021, the last quarter, everybody was seeing digital fatigue. And what that meant was all content consumption, whether it was webinars or blog posts or video, they were seeing a decline in the effectiveness of it. So there's a lot of red flags right now and a lot of sort of shifting in thought in terms of how are we going to get more out of our marketing, and content is a huge subset.
Yeah. So let me push back on that a little bit. So I agree. There's been a flood of stuff. People are exhausted. They're zoomed out. Part of it is because there's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of crap out there. I mean, people don't consume, it's fool all the people all the time. I want to sort of draw the line between church and state, if you will, between content marketing and thought leadership, because I think there's a lot of confusion, whatever. And it's not that one is better than another or smarter than another or whatever, but how do you see that playing out? Or how would you think about it?
I think probably more importantly, you see a distinction that maybe CMOs don't.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's true.
And I think when they think of thought leadership, they think of that either as their reason for doing content or as part of their content program. It's an approach, right?
But most marketers, and by the way, I'm a marketer as well, think in terms of campaigns and response and call to action, as they clearly should, right? So Correct. If here's a pen, if I was marketing this pen, there's lots of content I could think of to come up with to best effectively market this pen. It could be funny, it might be video, it might be articles. I doubt it would be academic papers, but there's a whole slew of things, all in service of getting someone to buy the pen or to differentiate the pen or show this pen is better than another pen, right? When it comes to thought leadership, I think where CMOs struggle and they're not really sure where to embrace this beast is where does it live and what does it do, right? So at some level, yes, it's there to build the brand. At some level, yes, it's there to acquire net new clients, but there's a little bit of, holier than thou there. We don't talk about product in thought leadership. We don't talk about use case or benefits or features as we would in content marketing. So I think there is a distinction, and it's like anything else. It's yet another tool in the toolbox, know when to use which one wisely.
Yeah, one of the things that I tried to do in the book is radically simplify all of this. And because B2B marketing had gotten ridiculously complicated, we'd done all sorts of research and showed that 90% of CMOs realized that B2B marketing had off the chart, and it hadn't correlated to increased effectiveness. And that was over a 2-year period of research that we did. And the problem is the peanut butter effect, right? They're just doing too many things across too many categories with too much data. And the result is there is no actually one single core idea that holds the pieces together. So if we set that up as a problem, thought leadership fits into all of the solution as long as it supports the brand strategy.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
And that's a key thing here. So I think thought leadership, in my book at least, where I see the biggest problems with thought leadership are that it is focused on, we got to get new customers, we got to get it as a acquisition tool, and as a result of that, it often doesn't serve any master. But if they think about it from a customer standpoint, secondly, by the way, I think employees are probably the first. If your employees don't read your content, that's a problem too, right? But let's just talk about, if you do thought leadership for your current customers, you never lose.
No, so stay there a minute, because I think you're 1,000% right. It's got to be tight. So who are the avatars you're trying to connect with, and the tone and the language and what you're saying and how you're saying it is very different if you're reaching out to marketers or the C-suite or technical people, whatever. And then the next thing I would say is not just the avatars, what are their pain points? So if it's sort of like paying Mad Libs or something. If you can't match those two things up, who cares? And you have to give me insight. You can't be regurgitating what I already know. You're giving me insight. You're giving me knowledge. You're giving me a different way to think about the problem, to build the trust that I have to eventually reach out to you and say, hey, Drew, read your stuff, read your book. Can you help me?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds simple when you say it. I mean, we break it down, but the reality is we both know that most content isn't worth reading. Sure. Most content isn't worth watching. And the reason I think it boils back to, and I sort of, in the book, I create this framework called the CATS framework: courageous, artful, thoughtful, and scientific. And I believe if you use that as a guiding light for your content, you win. And most content isn't courageous because it doesn't differentiate. It doesn't help distinguish the brand.
So I put that in the leadership side of thought leadership, is you have to have the courage to take the conversation to a new place, a different place, a place that someone hasn't thought. Otherwise, what's
the point? You're just recycling Google stuff.
Right. Exactly.
So courage, and this notion of daring to be distinct applies so effectively to content, right? And one of the ways that we can distinguish ourselves is we're individuals. We have our own points of view. And this is where it gets really tricky. And, you see great content from CEOs often, where they're really expressing. There are a few B2B CEOs that are really good at this, or executives who are really good writers, and you follow them and they built a cult of personality.
Right.
I think there's something to that on its own, but I think brands can do it too, and CMOs can do it too. And I'm seeing a lot more CMOs get out there and expressing it. And one of the things that came out of the pandemic that is good is suddenly CMOs recognize, empathy, that's an important word. It's an important idea. And
but I want to go before that. So by the time I've hit CMO, other than probably looking for my next job due to the average tenure of a CMO, which is a different problem, I'm at the level that I want to be, right? What I would argue is 5, 10, maybe even a dozen years before that, what are you doing as a junior, mid-level, up-and-coming marketer to establish a sense of thought leadership? Because all else being equal, if I have a choice of hiring Drew or Peter, and Drew's written a book and Drew's written articles and Drew different speeches, I kind of get that for free right? So that comes along with it. And I think that's a big deal, is building this before you need it. And it's better than personal branding.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have to say, I mean, when I started writing articles for, initially it was Fast Company. And I said in 2007, I said, I'm going to write an article every single week. And then once I started writing those articles every week, I realized, I'm going to need something to write about. So that's when I started to interview chief marketing officers. And then this thing snowballed. I mean, after the first 100 interviews, I had my first book and so forth. So I think you're right. But it takes time, and it takes consistency, and it takes a point of view and a lot of diligence. Now, here's an interesting part of this. After the, 200th interview, started the podcast, because why the heck not, right? I was already doing the interviews. 400th interview, the next book. But there was a business in there that I didn't realize. And that's where CMO huddles came out of.
Which is community. Which is this connection and community, right? So to me, there's the 3 C's of thought leadership, or the content, which used to be the only C. Then there's the connection, and then the community. So, I mean, you're talking about exactly that. You've now put together these CMO huddles, which are communities of marketers, of chief marketing officers. So they're coming together to talk about what CMOs do. So there's a content piece, there's a connection piece, and there's a community piece.
Well, and also just to sort of put a nice ribbon on that, or a bow on it, is that having done all these interviews, I'm suddenly uniquely positioned to continue to have the conversations with these folks. I didn't know that when I started. And so if you're a mid-level marketer now and thinking about your own personal brand and there is nothing like making a commitment to start writing, because when you make a commitment to write, you make a commitment to having a point of view, right? And because if you don't, no one's going to read it. But as you do it, you get better and better and better. You get easier for you, and ultimately good things happen. I mean, and this is the thing. Most people, Dory Clark talks about that a lot. Yep. Most people record like 9 podcasts and give up. Most people start writing
totally true
and give up. And I think that's part of it. But I will say for brands, just consistency is important, but it's not enough.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
Well, but when you're talking about consistency, I think there's also consistency in cadence. So I know, in the 1800s when I started blogging, and I am a mediocre writer at best, I went to a couple of good friends that were blogging already for a while, and I said, okay, give me the hacks, give me the tricks, give me the shortcut. And one of a buddy of mine that knows me well said, listen, you're like everybody else. You're an entrepreneur, you're impatient, you want to see instant results. Don't commit to writing one blog, commit to writing 100. And I was like, wow, like 100. And he's like, yeah, because you're going to get impatient. You're going to look at the data. Number 5 didn't do anything. By the time you get to 15 or 20, you've made your case that this is pointless and you'll stop doing it. And he was 1,000% right. When I launched my podcast, and we're coming up on 400 episodes in 4 years now, I didn't commit to 100. I committed to 50, right? And it was true. It was right about that like 30, 35, 40 mark where I started to see a little bit of the flywheel, people reaching out to us. Now it pays dividends. There's a flywheel. It's working. And I have to put in less effort. And it not that it runs itself, but we have a library, we have back catalog, we've done a lot of work. And by the way, we've invested a ton of time, energy, effort, money into doing it, making sure that it's of a certain quality.
And as you're thinking of this as a sidebar, but one of the ways that we're encouraging our clients and the CMOs I talk to in huddles is everything in 2022 is going to be about less but better. And so one of the things about doing less but better is that you invest a lot in whatever one particular piece. Like, we're big fans of research studies. We do these proprietary research studies. They take a fair amount of time to do, but when you're done, you get a proprietary piece of research that you can sell against, that you can inform your customers against, that you can excite your employees. You can cut it up into all sorts of things, webinars. So if you are investing in one good thing, you end up with 30 different pieces out of it or more, and these things have long value, then you can rationalize that.
So that's a great segue to where I was going next, which is, you just recently come out with your book, Renegade Marketing, right? Yep. And there's lots of ways to write a book, and there's lots of reasons to write a book. And what I love is, because you're a marketer, you're focused. So I don't believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you wrote this book thinking this will be the next Good to Great, I'm going to sell 1 million copies. So let's start, because I think a lot of people are delusional when they write a book. Let's work this backwards. What were the goals and objectives that you had when you made the commitment to write the book?
Well,
what success look like?
Right. Well, it started with this. It started about 4 years ago when I saw, well, first of all, it started 10 years ago when I wrote my first book and realized, okay, I'm going to write 3 books. The first one will be just the book that was easiest to write. The second one will be something on B2B marketing. I didn't know what. And the third one will be about Ben Franklin, and stay tuned on that later on. The second one, so about 4 years ago, we saw this trend that B2B marketing was getting ridiculously complicated. So we said, can we solve this problem? So we created a process, this 12-step process. We were thinking, let's see if it worked. I actually went out and started talking to CMOs about this and got some more things. I kept doing interviews.
Wait, so pause right there, because irregardless of the domain, in your case as CMOs, we advocate doing the same thing. So oftentimes where thought leaders are guilty, not marketers, they create an isolation. I'm going to spend a year researching this book, writing this book, whatever. Go to the market quickly and talk to them. They will tell you what's on their minds. They will tell you what's bothering them. But so many people are afraid to do that. And by the way, you frame it in a case of not that I have a definitive thing yet, but I'm doing a little homework on this, doing a little research on this. I'd like to grab an hour of your time, Drew, and talk about blah, blah, blah. Right. And I think not enough people do that.
So we created this little 12-step guide, literally.
Yep.
Created that, went on a roadshow. I presented about, I'm going to say 7 times to small groups of CMOs to see if it would resonate. Then wrote up the book. Okay. I was done February 2020.
Okay.
Comes the pandemic. I put the book on hold and said, I want to be sure that this book is still relevant. So I waited on almost an entire year, actually longer than that. Kept doing interviews, kept figuring, and then sort of the process didn't change. We flipped one step, but the process didn't change. And suddenly it got better because I now had new cases that supported the story, and we had pandemic relevance. So I knew we could go past pandemic. So, but rather than just wait for another year and a half, we took the book version, the first one I wrote, stripped 30,000 words out of it, put a 15,000 word blog post, 15,000 word blog post, the mother of all blog posts, free, ungated on renegade.com with some very good SEO in it. If you type in B2B brand strategy, generally Renegade comes up first because of that mother of all blog posts. So it didn't the original thing was, can we solve this problem? We went out and learned about it. We applied it to our clients and then wrote the book and then waited. But we didn't, so part of the validation of the book also was while I was rewriting it, was that this blog post was like unbelievable.
So that gave you market validation that there's a thing here. I've tapped into a vein, I've scratched an itch. So go back though and say, great, you've now validated what I've done in this research would make a good book. Right. But go back to the goal of the book, right? Because this isn't going to be, good to great or in search of excellence. No disrespect there. But what did you want the book to achieve? Is it about brand? Is it about net new client acquisition? Is it about showing people your frameworks and models so they know what they get when they work with you? What were the objectives?
Yeah, I think that's really it. What I have found, and so the minute the book was done, I could send this to every prospect that we had. And I said, look, read this. This is how we think. This is going to, no matter what happens, you're going to get value out of this. And this is our approach. And if you're aligned with this approach, we can work together. Great. And so, and we do 2 things in addition to helping brands. I help CMOs on an individual level. So now if they read the book, there's a shorthand here.
Right. So stay there a minute. So I'm going to extrapolate from the book, high quality thought leadership. Right. So I know in my world, speaking both for myself and clients, when someone has, invested the time in your thought leadership, whether that's reading your book, your articles, your videos, your podcast, and then they reach out to you. First of all, you're not aware that they're even in your sales cycle or whatever. And they come to you and the sales cycle has just been really short. Why? They're quoting you back. They're saying, listen, hey, Drew, I just finished your book. So you already know, they know your models, know your framework, whatever, where to take the discussion. So you're going to ask them things like, what resonated with the most with you? What did you find? Or, whatever. So I love that thought leadership becomes the accelerant to sales. And by the way, you could also say, I don't agree with anything this guy says. I'm not going to call him. And that's okay.
Exactly. No, I mean, this is all about narrowcasting. I mean, we just, there isn't time. I hate the expression boil the ocean, but it's true with marketing. And if we want to avoid a Peter effect, you might as well. And again, we're going back to dare to be distinct. I'm giving you a point of view. I'm giving you a strong thing. What's the Renegade thing? Employees, customers, then prospects in that order. If you don't believe that, I'm not your guy. Right. We're not it. But if you believe that without your employees being able to sort of buy into the brand, you can't be successful. We should talk.
And I would imagine you have people coming to you to say, you know what, Drew, I've been a CMO for 20 years, and I never thought about this employee first approach. Read your stuff, looked at your stuff. I want to have a conversation because now I'm considering changing my thoughts on that. Right. So it's not that they disagree, but they just may never have, as most haven't, thought of it that way. That's your special sauce, right? Because everybody else.
They haven't thought about it. Most of them haven't. And so we have in the book, there's actually an employee survey that we say, well, and that's a step for us in our branding process. But look, knock yourself out, go. And part of it now is Renegade has sort of become, I mean, CMO Huddles has been really successful. I'm so thrilled. Yep. I'm so grateful for that. And so we're very selective now with Renegade clients. Everything we're doing now is mainly about helping CMOs and CMO Huddles. And this book is supporting that. And,
yep.
and
it's one big ecosystem. It all plays
exactly
together. Well, yeah. So this has been great. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing everything that you have and your perspective. And you and I could talk for hours, but this has been fantastic. And thank you for sharing, Drew.
Thank you, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.